well, since 3 arrests were made. Because if you'll see, in 2016, Garcia and Rivera were arrested. In 2016, Miss Magbanua was arrested. Sure, you're all wondering what's going on with the Adelsons, right? Donna, she's probably at home watching TV, probably watching this trial. Charles Adelson, arrested a month ago. A month ago. His lawyer is in here right now, back there, watching, taking notes, preparing for whenever Charlie's going to go to trial. Wendi Adelson, the state is going to give her immunity to come and testify in this case for them. Watch her, members of the jury, because she thinks she's going to be able to put on a fantastic performance, but that's all it's going to be, is a performance. Because what you are going to see is not only does she have a motive to protect her family, including her brother, who is now arrested, but she also has a motive to protect herself.
Yeah, right?
I'd been advised by my lawyer not to read it.
All right. Now, we're not talking about reading stuff. There's podcasts.
Also not to listen.
TV shows.
Also not to watch.
Articles.
Don't read.
And so you've made the decision. Now, you're a lawyer yourself too, right?
I am.
And you made the decision, I'm not going to look at any of this stuff.
Correct.
I don't want to know what happened to the father of my 2 children.
Not I don't want to know what happened.
How can you say you love those boys if you don't care who killed the father that they loved?
Of course I care who killed the father that they loved.
Then why won't you look at the stuff?
I've been advised not to.
Are you afraid that when you look at it, you're going to realize that your brother did this?
I am not afraid of that.
Now, of course, you've, and we won't get into privileged communications, but you've spoken to your lawyer about the case.
How are we not getting into privileged communications? Yes, I've spoken to my lawyer about the case.
You're very intelligent. You have one of the top defense attorneys in the country, a former federal prosecutor, John Lower, right there in the blue suit, right?
He is my attorney.
You're telling me with all of this at your disposal, your intelligence, his experience, and all this information, that you don't care to find out who it is that killed Professor Markel?
This is not that I don't care to find out. My job is to take care of those boys, and that is what I do. I don't see how it helps take care of them to go reading and watching and soaking up all of the horrible information that's out there.
You don't realize that you could be helpful in finally untangling this to give this jury the truth about what happened to Professor Markel?
I have been nothing but helpful since this started.
To what happened to their son? By you looking at it, you are at the center of all this, but you won't look at anything to help in the process.
I've done nothing but help in this process.
You came here and testified.
I came here and testified. I spoke to the police for 6 hours without anyone present. I signed over my cell phone, my car, my house, everything, my computer. What else do I have or know that you haven't seen?
You came here because you were subpoenaed and had no choice.
Correct.
Right?
This is not fun. I would not do this by choice.
You've been inconvenienced.
I've not been inconvenienced.
Professor Markel was shot in the head.
I'm not complaining about being here. This is my duty. I'm here.
We'll get back to you complaining about being here. Do you honestly expect this jury to believe that you haven't confronted your brother about all of this?
Yes, I do.
Yes, you did confront him?
Yes, I do expect them to believe that I did not confront my brother because I didn't.
Or maybe you don't need to because you know the truth in this case. You already know it. That he went behind your back, right?
Did not happen.
Just like he has done with past boyfriends. He's done that in the past where he's gone behind your back when you were having problems in a relationship and dealt with it himself.
No.
Miss Adelson, you understand that until you expose your brother what he did, that everybody's going to consider you as guilty. You understand that, right?
What is the question that you're asking me?
You understand that until you expose your brother and explain what he did, that he went behind everybody's back, that he hired a hitman to murder your ex-husband, you'll remain guilty in the eyes of the world.
I can't speak to the eyes of the world. I can only know that I have done nothing wrong.
Or maybe you are guilty.
I am not guilty.
You are guilty.
I am not
You
guilty.
are guilty.
I am not
You are
guilty.
guilty.
I am not guilty.
So, a witness in this case, and I'm not going to get into their testimony, but one of the hitmen, the convicted hitman, implicates you. On July 17, 2014, the day before the murder, the morning before, he says that you were walking on Trescott with the 2 boys that you walked down the driveway and into the house.
That never happened.
Right, because Professor Markel, I apologize, Professor Markel, he had the kids. Based on the way that your guy's schedule was, on that day he would have had the children in the morning, and you're going through such a bad divorce, you wouldn't be at his house, right?
I wouldn't be at his house anyway, but not because we were going through a bad divorce. At that time, things were pretty copacetic.
All right, so we're coming back to maybe you do know, or maybe you were involved.
Excuse me? What's the question that you're asking me?
I'm giving you a header of what we're talking about so that it will ease you in the question, okay? I'm just telling you what the topic that we're on, so we'll get to a question. Now, the government asked you about a time that you met Miss Magbanua. It was actually spring break of March 2014, right?
I believe so.
You went down to Miami. You stayed with your brother Charles.
I went down to Fort Lauderdale after being in Immokalee and stayed with my brother.
You then went to Miami Beach to Yardbird and had dinner outside with your boyfriend at the time, or who you were dating, Jeffrey Lacasse. Katherine Magbanua was there, and your brother Charles Adelson, and you all ate outside, right?
We did.
And that's on Miami Beach, not in Fort Lauderdale.
Correct.
Now, just for context, Jeffrey Lacasse, he was also an FSU professor, not at the law school, but an FSU professor. Nice guy, right?
I don't think so now.
Now, you deny, I'm assuming, that on July 13, 2014, you told Jeffrey Lacasse that Charles looked into hiring a hitman. You deny that, or you admit that?
I deny that.
And that you told him that Charles looked into hiring a hitman back in September of 2013.
That never happened.
Which would have been months before your brother even met Katherine Magbanua.
I don't remember when they met.
Letting you know the topic we're on, we're talking about you being involved. That same week, earlier in the week, you sent an email. We're talking about the week of the murder now, not spring break, the week of the murder, not Yardbird, the week of the murder. You sent an email to Jeffrey Lacasse saying that you wanted to break up, that you needed space, right?
I did.
Sent him a long email. Stay away. We're broken up. Right?
I did.
You knew that on July 18, 2014, Jeffrey Lacasse was leaving town to go on a trip, right?
I knew he was leaving at some point that week. I don't remember when.
You knew that he was leaving on the same day of the murder at the same exact time as the murder.
I don't think I did.
11 a.m. on July 18, 2014.
I don't think I knew when he was leaving town.
It's a good way to put the blame onto somebody else. You'd agree on that, right? If it happened, it would have been a good way to put the blame on somebody else.
I have no idea when he was going to leave town.
Your interview, July 18, 2014, you said, my brother, he joked about hiring a hitman. Perhaps that was you just planting a seed to divert the attention of law enforcement away from you.
It was not.
Let's jump off topic right now and talk about your boys' names. That in the time after the murder, you changed their last names from Markel to Adelson, right?
A year later, yes.
Why?
I was scared
Of what?
of someone coming to attack them.
So it's a year later, you won't look at anything because you don't want to know what's going on in the case. And the thought is, well, they're going to be protected if they have my last name and not Markel, right?
Yes.
Now, years later, arrests are made. It's clear who committed the murder, Sigfredo Garcia, Luis Rivera. The Adelson name has been dragged through the mud. Why haven't you continued to protect your boys and changed the name back?
I will be changing I'm not going to change the name back. I don't think that will help. One day I'll change all of our names.
The government asked you about immunity, so let's get into that. You explained that as an attorney, you understand that when the government gives a subpoena for somebody to testify, that it conveys immunity, right?
That's my understanding. My knowledge of criminal law dates back to 2003 when I took a semester in law school, so forgive me.
Graduated law school, right?
This isn't my area of law.
When you clerked on the 11th Circuit, it was with Judge Jordan, right?
I did immigration appeals.
Yeah, but you still dealt with criminal stuff as well, too.
Very little.
So Your understanding, though, is it doesn't mean they can't arrest you. They just can't use what you say here against you later on. So you're protected.
Correct.
And you needed that to testify, right?
It's just given to testify. It's not a question of whether I needed it. It comes with testifying.
You fear being charged by them, so you need to have that protection of
I
your words.
don't fear being charged for a crime I didn't commit, no.
Now, y'all had this nice exchange where it was pleasant, but there's actually tension between you and this office, right?
No.
They recently had your brother Charles Adelson arrested, and he's in custody, right?
Correct.
For first-degree murder.
Correct.
And there's no tension?
It's very uncomfortable to be here. It's hard to tell where the tension is coming from.
They've discussed your involvement in this case. They insinuated it on the direct examination. There's no tension?
Lots of media insinuates that I did something I didn't do too. I can't feel tension towards every person in the world.
That's funny. I thought you didn't look at anything.
I don't, that's why.
But you know that you know about the media, but you don't know about the media?
I know about the media because it keeps me from employment. It keeps me from lots of things in my life. I'm aware of what's there, but I don't read the minutia so I can sleep at night.
Ms. Adelson, 5 minutes ago you said you don't look at any of that stuff.
I
Now
don't
asked you a
look at
question.
it.
Let me finish.
Sure.
5 minutes ago you say you don't look at any of that stuff. Now I ask you a question, you say you look at stuff.
That's not actually what I said. I said I'm aware that it exists, but I don't read it. I don't listen to it.
Then how do you know that they're bashing you?
You just told me they are.
I did?
Yeah.
How about this? We'll come back to it. You can think up a better answer, okay?
I'm not thinking up an answer. I'm telling you the truth. I'm sorry if you don't want to listen to it.
Your basic understanding of criminal law, though, you know that if the defense gives you a subpoena, you get no immunity.
Correct.
Correction, improper question.
I'm not going beyond that question.
All right, that's the only question you can ask on that.
If I give you a subpoena, you don't get immunity, right?
Correct.
Your family dynamic. It is your mother and father, Harvey and Donna. There's you, you're the youngest, Charles, and then the oldest, Robert. Right?
Correct.
And he's a doctor up in New York.
Correct.
Now, the government asked you about the relationship, and you're like, we don't talk much. It's actually much deeper than that with Robert, isn't it?
We don't talk
At all.
at all.
And the reason is because your parents were so difficult about the woman that is now his wife.
That is not the reason why we don't talk.
I'm not talking about the reason why you don't talk. Let me clarify it. The reason why your parents don't talk to him.
That's not the reason why they don't talk with them.
Are you saying to this jury that there wasn't a problem where they outright objected to his marriage of a woman that was not of the Jewish faith?
That was initially what happened, and then there was actually a beautiful reconciliation, and they're very happy about the marriage.
Robert and his wife, not your family.
Robert and his wife and our family were very happy about Robert's marriage.
So what happens is that Robert is in love with a woman. Your parents object. He breaks up with her and then dates a Jewish woman, right?
And then they got married and divorced, and then he got back together with the person he wanted to be married to. Yes.
With his true love.
Yes.
But there was a lot of tension in your family because of your family's involvement in the kids' marriages, right?
Yes.
Let's talk briefly about your children. The government had asked you in the topic of the Jewish faith, keeping kosher. You mentioned a bat mitzvah at one point in time. You're currently planning a bat mitzvah for your oldest, right?
No, it already happened.
Okay, now that is a very, Christopher, I'm obviously not Jewish, but my understanding is that it is a very, very important thing in the Jewish faith.
It's a very important milestone.
And for those that are very conservative in the Jewish faith, those that keep kosher, so to speak, it's even bigger.
I don't know that it's more important to one segment of Judaism over another, but it's an important coming of age ceremony.
It's where a boy becomes a man. Did you invite Dan Markel's parents, the kids' grandparents?
I did.
You invited them.
I invited them, yes.
When was the last time they saw face-to-face their grandchildren?
April 20th,
Of this year?
just now.
And you agree with me that it had been years since 2016 since the last time they had seen them?
The visit stopped when they threatened to put my children in foster care, yes, but up until that point they did have visits.
But you got no problem letting them see your brother Charles, right?
I'm sorry?
You have no problem letting them hang out with your brother Charles, who's now sitting in custody for first-degree murder.
Well, they can't see him now, can they?
No, they can't, but I'll ask the questions. For years, They weren't able to see their grandchildren despite their pleading to you to see them. But you let them, let me finish, but you let them hang out with your murdering brother, right?
The children were permitted to see their grandparents. I cooked for them. We had play dates. They had sleepovers. When a letter surfaced that they were trying to have my children placed in foster care, the visits stopped. My brother never threatened to put my children in foster care, and if he had, the visits would have stopped with him too.
You say you love your boys.
I do say I love my children.
Don't care about the father that they love. What
I
happened?
never said that I don't care about the father that they
Then
loved.
look at some of the discovery and help figure it out.
Excuse me?
Then look at some of the evidence and help figure it out so that more lives aren't ruined by this.
I seem to
Mr.
not
DeCosta,
understand.
you need to ask a question now. You're making statements, now you need to ask a question.
Understood, Your Honor. If I could have one brief second to check with co-counsel. We started this by saying that this is all about you. It started with you because of this marriage, right?
No. Well, you had tried to say that, but I don't agree.
Ms. Adelson, I'm going to make one final attempt through questions to implore you. You understand that you can't protect your brother Charles, who's going through this case, and protect yourself at the same time. You understand that, right?
I'm here to share the truth with you. I don't know how to answer the question.
Then please end the madness and share the truth. Will you please share the truth with this jury?
I've been sharing the truth since I walked in here. I've done nothing but share the truth.
You know what happened here, despite your claims to the jury that you haven't looked at anything, you haven't discussed with anybody, and you haven't confronted your brother. You know what happened here, right?
I do not know what happened here, and if I did, I would have shared it with the police 8 years ago.
You know that your brother went behind your back, don't you?
I do not.
Like he always does. This is something that he has always done, isn't it?
It is not.
You found out after that your brother had done this and gone behind your back. That's why you were thrown up at that dinner, right?
No, it's not.
You know that it didn't involve Katie either, right?
I don't know anything about...
If you're not going to say all of that and finally give the truth, why don't you just admit to this jury that you're guilty?
Because I'm not guilty.
One brief moment, Your Honor. I got nothing further, Judge.
Redirect.
No, sir, she's free to go about her business.
All right, you're free to go. Thank you.
All right.
All right, let's put Ms. Rodriguez back on the stand and complete her cross-examination at this point. Mr. DeCosta, you prepared for that?
Actually, Your Honor, we're going to waive cross on Ms. Rodriguez. Counsel and I had some conversations. We figured out another.
Because Dan Markel was murdered before the hearing. So back in the summer of 2013, when Wendi Adelson's motion for relocation was initially denied, Charlie Adelson looked into having Dan Markel killed. But as the defense correctly points out, Charlie Adelson didn't even know Katherine Magbanua back in 2013. And hence, the murder did not happen back in 2013. The murder did not happen until Katherine Magbanua came into the picture. The murder did not happen until Katherine Magbanua made it happen. And what about the timing of when Wendi Adelson stood in the kitchen and told Jeffrey Lacoste, "Can I tell you something in confidence? My brother did seriously look into having Dan Markel killed." That statement was made in 2014, just 5 days before Dan Markel was murdered by a hitman. So the seed for this conspiracy was planted when Charlie Adelson began looking into committing the murder in the summer of 2013 after the judge ruled against Wendy's relocation. And it continued to grow when all efforts to coerce and bully Dan Markel into permitting this relocation failed. Then it further festered with this motion to have no contact with Grandma unsupervised. And as Wendi relayed to Jeffrey Lacoste just 5 days before the murder, she was never going to be able to resolve this problem unless something happened to Danny. But this conspiracy took root when Charlie Adelson met somebody that could get it done. Someone who was in a position of trust in his life. A person that was his girlfriend, this defendant. And Katherine Magbanua had ties to the kind of people who were willing and able to walk up to a complete stranger and point a gun at his head and pull the trigger twice. And guess what wasn't a problem once Dan Markel was gone? Relocation. A couple days after the murder, Wendi Adelson and her boys are living within walking distance from the Adelson residence at the Icon. Their names were changed from Markel to Adelson. And just like that, their father was erased from their lives, 2 and 3 years old. No more fights over kosher diets, no more squabbles over marital assets, and no more Dan Markel. And they might have gotten away with it if it wasn't for Mr. Geiger, who bothered to be a good neighbor on July 18, 2014, and investigate a situation that was really none of his business because something just didn't seem right. His description of that Prius was critical to this investigation, that identification of that suspect vehicle, a Prius that would later be detected following Dan Markel earlier that day at the gym. They might have gotten away with it if not for the tireless efforts of law enforcement to cull through the mountains of records and data that were collected in this case, really just looking for needles in a haystack. And they found a few. For example, they found Sigfredo Garcia's phone number amongst the hundreds of numbers present at or near the gym that day. They cross-referenced that number with all the call detail records collected from all the Adelsons, which bore a single hit. We discussed in jury selection that although you will not be asked to decide the guilt of anyone other than this defendant, it's going to be necessary for you to understand the roles of each person that's involved and each player that's involved in this case in order to understand how it is that this defendant fits into this conspiracy. And we get to her through these people in 2 ways, or by 2 different paths. Path 1, the Prius. The Prius led Garcia and Rivera, and those 2 led to Magbanua. Notice how we get it right in reference to Garcia. We get it right in reference to Rivera. We get it right in reference to Charlie Adelson. And you've heard quite a lot about the government's theory. They call us the government because nobody likes the government. And per the defense, our theory is completely correct in all regards except for one. We got it all right except for her. Got it wrong on her. Everything is not as it appears when it comes to her. The defense has characterized this investigation as biased. Luis Rivera and Jessica Rodriguez are liars. The cops and prosecutors are all crooked. But please remember that what the lawyers say is not evidence. You must look to the evidence alone in deciding your verdict. And what the evidence has shown is that we had a law enforcement team that had a lot of work to do with a lot of details and a lot of pieces that we had to sort of try to distill for you into one cognizable presentation. And that's what we've attempted to do. The law enforcement team managed to pull a single Prius out of a haystack of Priuses and tie it to 2 men, one of whom is the defendant's children's father, and the other of whom took the witness stand and told you that she's the mastermind behind this whole thing. The second path this investigation took was the motive. Who wanted to kill Dan Markel? The ex-wife and the in-laws hated his guts and are also connected to this defendant, the woman who knew people who could get a thing like this done. This is the defendant's day in court, and we talked at jury selection about the importance of focusing on her and her role. I know that's been hard to do because the proceedings sometimes felt like we were talking about other people the whole time. And I encourage you to consider the fact that it's easy to point at an empty chair. It's easy to pile on to bad actors when those folks are not represented in court. And I think one of the lawyers pointed out, oh, their lawyers are out there in the audience watching. And you know, it suits the defendant's purposes in this trial to pile on to everybody else. Everybody else is guilty. Guilty, guilty, guilty. That one did it. That one did it. But not me. I don't know anything. You better believe that when it is time for one of those other actors to be tried in court, it'll be a dogfight just like it was here, except it'll be, she's guilty. I'm not guilty. I didn't do anything. She acted on her own. All I did was make a joke, and she went and hauled off and hired a hitman. So let's review what we can agree on in this case. We got it right that the motive for killing Dan Markel was for the benefit of Wendi Adelson. We got it right that the in-laws were desperate to move her to South Florida and had the money and the audacity to actually do this kind of thing. We got it right that Charlie paid with his stapled money. And we got it right that Luis Rivera and Sigfredo Garcia were paid to kill Dan Markel. It's natural for you to find yourself wondering, you know, what's going on with all these other people? You know, it's okay, it's natural, it's human for you to have feelings and emotions about the case. The people involved, lawyers involved. You can think Luis Rivera should not have gotten a deal, or Luis Rivera's deal was too great. You can think other people should be arrested, other people should be prosecuted. That's fine. You just have to separate those emotions out and weigh your verdict, base your verdict solely on the evidence in this case against this defendant. As we talked about in jury selection, you're asked to make a wise and legal decision solely about her role in this. Was this crime committed? And was she one of the people that committed this crime? Anyone else is for another day and another jury. But you just can't talk about the case without talking about all of them. It's the Adelsons that had a motive to get this murder done so that Wendi could move. You will not be asked to decide about them, but the evidence is clear that the thing was ultimately done for Wendi. Sigfredo Garcia and Luis Rivera were told that it was for Wendi. They believed they were doing it for Wendi. Possibly because that's true. I mean, ultimately it was for Wendi, but also possibly because the person that hired them, this defendant, was walling Charlie off from them. Walling Sigfredo off from knowing that the money was coming from Charlie, the boyfriend, the dentist. The TV is the first piece of code that we hear in this case. Charlie Adelson got Wendi a TV as a divorce present, as a cheaper alternative to hiring a hitman. Then the same TV is her alibi for the murder, a service appointment that her mother set up for her from South Florida, or at least there's some indication of that. And then on the wire, when Donna Adelson is speaking in code in that first call, weird thing to do after being approached by an alleged gangster, she says this TV is going to cost about $5,000, referring to the $5,000 on the note that the undercover handed her. It's obvious they're referring to their conspiracy and hearkening back to this TV as code for the murder of Dan Markel. The players in this case are very smart. The crime in this case was given a lot of thought and preparation. We know that the seed was planted for this thing almost a year or more before it came to fruition. They thought of everything: a clever TV-related alibi for Wendi, a frame job for Lacoste, bullet bourbon, and they insulated themselves by hiring this defendant as a middleman between them, the ones that wanted it done, and the shooters. Everyone on the board in this case had some limits to their knowledge. And that was really smart. That made this case much harder to break. But don't let the way that they thought they would get away with this case be the way they get away with this case.
It's close to that, where you can say, yes, Miss Magbanua had something to do with it. And that's because she is innocent. That's why, members of the jury, that evidence doesn't exist because she is not guilty. That is how Miss Magbanua sits here today, living the worst nightmare that anyone on this planet could imagine. Sitting in a jail for a crime you did not commit. knowing all the while that all you have to do to go home is lie. I'm involved and Charlie got me to do this. She got up there and told you herself, I believe he's guilty. I want him to pay for what he did to Dan Markel and also for getting me involved in this nonsense. And all she'd have to do is lie, members of the jury. That's it. She's not Luis Rivera. No matter what she did, she has stuck to the truth every single time. And she's not going to sink to his level just to buy her freedom. This is another question that Ms. Kappelman, when she gets back up there, is not going to be able to answer you. Why in the world would Katherine not cooperate if she were guilty? Why? She's going to come up here and speculate, maybe this and that. She told you you can't use speculation. What evidence can she show you to say is a legitimate reason why? If she knows that's all they want, if she were guilty, why wouldn't she take the deal? Why? She's going to sit in jail and take her chances on a first-degree murder case with 2 other first-degree solicitation and conspiracy charges? You heard Luis Rivera, that he was facing the death penalty on one of those charges. I'm not saying she was, but that's just to show you the level of severity that she is facing. And all she would have to do is just say, yeah, I'm going to tell you your truth, and she could go home. But she's not Luis Rivera. If she does not come up here, Ms. Kappelman, and give you that explanation, something reasonable, something that's based on evidence, it's not guilty, members of the jury. Because there's no reasonable explanation why a guilty person wouldn't take that deal. That is evidence of her innocence. That unreliable word of Luis Rivera, and nothing more. Go back and listen to the Dolce Vita. That's how confident I am. Because I know for a fact there's nothing on there, because she is innocent. Justice for Dan Markel is not convicting an innocent person of this crime. In fact, it would be a travesty of justice to convict Ms. Magbanua of any of the charges in this case. She is across the board not guilty. And remember, she had nothing to do with this. That's what we're telling you. Nothing, no part of it. The state is throwing all of these charges at you, hoping and praying that just one of them will stick. That's all they want, just one. But I'm telling you, she is not guilty of all 3. Because if she didn't know, members of the jury, she's not guilty. You cannot convict her for having awful taste in men. You cannot convict her because the father of her children is a scumbag. You cannot convict her because she ended up dating Charles Adelson, probably one of the worst human beings on the face of the planet. She didn't know, members of the jury. And what the evidence in this case has proven to you is that she is not guilty of every single count. Please take the time to evaluate the evidence in this case. We have come this far. I'm confident that when you all sit there and you go over everything for yourself, you're going to see that she didn't do this, members of the jury. She's innocent. Find her not guilty.
Thank you, Ms. Claus.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ms. Kappelman, state rebuttal. You have 10 minutes.
So unfortunately, I cannot take up Mrs. Claus's invitation to explain to you why it is that criminal defendants choose to exercise their constitutional right and take a case to trial as opposed to doing a deal or taking a plea offer. Maybe she thinks she has very talented lawyers. Maybe she thinks she has a good chance of walking out of here. Maybe she thinks if she gets convicted, she'll offer to do something for me then. We'll see how that goes. Maybe she's getting a big payoff. Maybe somebody's threatened to do something to her. I don't know. And that's not important. I don't have to prove that to you because it's not an element of the offense in this case. Y'all really have to focus on what are the elements and have those been proven. A lot of the things that were suggested to you that I haven't proven, I don't have to prove. So I want to make sure you take a look at those elements when you get back there and think about what evidence do we have in this case to each one of those elements. The defense says none, there's nothing. We've just been sitting here for 10 days and nothing has occurred. That's going to be up to y'all. Did the case get proven? Was the evidence any good? That's up to you collectively and individually as jurors. Am I hiding things? Am I filtering things? You cannot speculate on items that did not come into evidence. The judge is the filter. What comes into evidence? This stuff over here in the testimony, you guys have to base your verdict on that. And if that's not enough, then it's insufficient evidence, lack of evidence. That can give rise to a reasonable doubt. But as far as, oh, we tried to get in this thing and y'all didn't get to hear it and they're hiding it and it must be something really good, that's speculation. That item is not in evidence because it was not admissible and you cannot speculate about it. Please do not accept their invitation to do that. Address some of the coincidences that really you have to buy in order to buy the defense theory in this case. I mean, everyone sort of agrees. You look at it and you think, yeah, she's in the middle. In order to buy the defense's theory that this evidence is not as it appears, you have to find that there are several things that are coincidences, and I'm sure you can think of a lot more, but I wrote down a few. Fact one, the defendant went to the rental car place. Okay, I mean, there's evidence she went to the rental car place. She says, no, I was visiting Kenya. But God, what a terrible coincidence that she's visiting Kenya both times that the rental car is getting rented and returned. Fact two, the money spike in this case. And you all have seen repeatedly that graph with the big spike in her cash that occurs right around the time of this murder. And she says this is not as it appears. I worked in the club, I made a lot of money, I happened to have the best month ever that month that Dan Markel was murdered, but that has nothing to do with me. The cash spike is not evidence of a crime. It's a coincidence. Or Sigfredo Garcia gave it to me, but remember that Yinder told you that the defendant went after Sigfredo Garcia for child support in January of 2015. So it's a little unbelievable that after, remember she said getting $1,000 from him would be a very significant amount of money. If she had just gotten, $13,000, $14,000, $17,000 from him between the murder and October the year prior, would she be going after him for child support in January of 2015? Is that just this money situation, is this just a terrible coincidence for her? Is it a terrible coincidence for her that she got placed on the payroll of the Adelson Institute and it just happened to be right after the murder and it just happens to be that she really doesn't seem to be able to tell us what she did for it? Fact three, Rivera flipped on her. He did. He flipped, he told what he knew, and she went under the bus as a result. Well, he's making up his testimony to comport with the reports in the case. He's a liar, he's a gangster, he's a thug. You shouldn't believe him. And she's just the unlucky victim of his made-up story to frame her. He's a liar, as are all the witnesses in the case, right? I mean, they kind of have to all be liars. Why didn't I just have Luis Rivera, since I'm also a liar and a crook who's trying to pull the wool over your eyes, why didn't I just have Rivera say, Garcia did it? Charlie Adelson did it. Why didn't I just do that? I'm desperate to get Charlie Adelson, aren't I? I'm laying awake at night, wanting to do this trial again. Why don't I just get Rivera to say whatever I want? That's what I'm doing, aren't I? Fact five, deep sea fishing. Or maybe I'm on four. Four, deep sea fishing. Look at this text. They made a joke about deep sea fishing. The problem is, and we published State's Exhibit 133, a clip from the defendant's prior testimony where she admits that was a joke. I am unaware of any evidence that Garcia and Rivera are in direct communication, and I'm not sure why my lawyers were trying to make it look like there was a connection between those two. She didn't even get what they were trying to do. Fact five. This is the biggest fact. I mean, she is literally in the middle. She is got a baby daddy who killed Dan Markel and a boyfriend who hired the hit. And she is to have you all believe that that is a coincidence. Her child's father, having nothing to do with her, happened to murder the brother-in-law of her boyfriend. It is often said that the best explanation is the simplest one. So we're up to 5, and I'm sure you can think of more explanations for the appearance of this case. Or one explanation, one that is simple and explains everything and is, I think, very well articulated and proven by the evidence that y'all have been held hostage and forced to listen to and see for the last 10 days. How many coincidences does it take for it to no longer be a coincidence? I want to talk about the defendant's own words. Next time, don't be such a dick to someone that has done something for you.
This is another question that Miss Kappelman, when she gets back up here, is not going to be able to answer you. Why in the world would Katherine not cooperate if she were guilty?
So unfortunately, I cannot take up Mrs. Colos's invitation to explain to you why it is that criminal defendants choose to exercise their constitutional right and take a case to trial as opposed to doing a deal or taking a plea offer. Maybe she thinks she has very talented lawyers. Maybe she thinks she has a good chance of walking out of here. Maybe she thinks if she gets convicted, she'll offer to do something for me then. We'll see how that goes. Maybe she's getting a big payoff. Maybe somebody's threatened to do something to her. I don't know. And that's not important. I don't have to prove that to you because it's not an element of the offense in this case. Y'all really have to focus on what are the elements and have those been proven. A lot of the things that were suggested to you that I haven't proven, I don't have to prove. Maybe she thinks she has very talented lawyers. Maybe she thinks she has a good chance of walking out of here. Maybe she thinks if she gets convicted, she'll offer to do something for me then. We'll see how that goes. Maybe she thinks she has very talented lawyers. Maybe she thinks she has a good chance of walking out of here. Maybe she thinks if she gets convicted, she'll offer to do something for me then. We'll see how that goes. So unfortunately, I cannot take up Mrs. Colos's invitation to explain to you why it is that criminal defendants choose to exercise their constitutional right and take a case to trial as opposed to doing a deal or taking a plea offer. Maybe she thinks she has very talented lawyers. Maybe she thinks she has a good chance of walking out of here. Maybe she thinks if she gets convicted, she'll offer to do something for me then. We'll see how that goes. Maybe she's getting a big payoff. Maybe somebody's threatened to do something to her. I don't know. And that's not important. I don't have to prove that to you because it's not an element of the offense in this case. Y'all really have to focus on what are the elements and have those been proven. A lot of the things that were suggested to you that I haven't proven, I don't have to prove. Maybe she thinks she has very talented lawyers. Maybe she thinks she has a good chance of walking out of here. Maybe she thinks if she gets convicted, she'll offer to do something for me then. We'll see how that goes. Maybe she thinks she has very talented lawyers. Maybe she thinks she has a good chance of walking out of here. Maybe she thinks if she gets convicted, she'll offer to do something for me then. We'll see how that goes.
Jury entering the courtroom.
All right, please be seated. Juror number 4, are you the foreperson?
Yes, sir.
And has the jury reached a verdict?
Yes, sir.
If you could please hand the verdict form to the bailiff. Thank you. All right, the verdict appears to be in proper form. I will now read the verdict. In the case of the State of Florida versus Katherine D. Magbanua, case number 2016 CF 3036 and 2018 CF 497, we, the jury, find as follows as to count 1. A, the defendant is guilty of first-degree murder. We, the jury, find as follows as to count 2. A, the defendant is guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. We, the jury, find as follows as to count 3. A, the defendant is guilty of solicitation to commit first-degree murder. And it is signed and dated by the foreperson. Out of the courtroom, the door is closed. Please be seated. We're still in session. Ms. Magbanua, you have been found guilty of the 3 counts. Count 1 of first-degree murder, count 2 of the conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, and count 3 of the solicitation to commit first-degree murder. We are going to set this for sentencing, and Ms. Magbanua is entitled to a pre-sentence investigation. Are you requesting that, Mr. DeCoste?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, so she's entitled to that. That will take approximately a month, and lately it's been taking even a little bit longer. So we will have that pre-sentence investigation ordered, and I will have that before the court. So we're going to set sentencing off for approximately 30 days, and then we'll get it scheduled. My assistant will be in touch with both parties, and we'll set for sentencing at that time. All right, Ms. Kappelman, anything else for the court?
No, Your Honor.
Anything else from the defense?
No, Your Honor.
All right, we'll be in recess then until sentencing. Thank you.